Over my career, I've come to believe in the concept of the subconscious writer and the conscious writer. And so this just basically means that because of the stories that they have heard of before or have read before, that everybody has this subconscious understanding of writing. And so while elements of this exists in storytelling in a general sense, simply being able to tell somebody of events from the beginning, middle, and to the end, I'm speaking more about the writing aspect, where you start using writing techniques like foreshadowing, world building, and symbolism. I also see this as the answer to something that wasn't necessarily a question, but it was being put forward rhetorically. But it is to say that why are the curtains blue, if you know what that meme is. The English teacher, who is usually in high school, which is very indicative of, or reveals rather, the level of writing knowledge. But back to the point, it is a meme where the English teacher would go on a tangent about how the curtains are blue because they have some type of philosophical meaning towards the story, while the author, on the other hand, would say, oh, the curtains are blue just because they are. And so where subconscious writing falls in is separate from death of the author in a sense. So it's not that we as critics or you as the reader are reading the story and then you see that the story could be interpreted in another way and then view that interpretation as equally valid as the author's interpretation. But it's to say that you are pushing forward the author's interpretation of the story. You are not only affirming but uplifting the original work with more meaning. And I feel that this goes back to the basics of how criticism even came about, where a lot of the people who used foreshadowing in their stories or symbolism did not know that they were using foreshadowing or symbolism. It wasn't a conscious endeavor for them. They were not intentionally going for that. And yet the result of the story in the end is that it fits in perfectly. And so later on, when the work is critiqued, what we can say is that we are simply naming what was already there. While not intentionally there, it is what is there, and now you are simply naming it. And so because of all this, the curtains are blue just because they are blue, but the curtains being blue also enhance the story beyond the author's, even the author's original intent. And this happens constantly in minor and in major ways. Constantly meaning in the context of storytelling in a general sense, rather than within one story, but it's to say that other stories as well have this. And I've personally mostly seen it as a result of an author working on their series for a long time, where they have an embedded understanding of the story's themes or the characters themselves. And so they intuitively know that something is the correct decision for the character or the story moving forward, or that for this specific character, this would be great symbolism. And so this subconscious writing method, not necessarily method, but this concept can explain how you can have great authors who have never been taught creative writing or have never gone to varsity for creative writing. And yet you see that the stories that they write are laced with good writing, or rather are laced with a lot of writing techniques that can be named. And yet if you were to speak to them, they would not know the name of these techniques. And I would say the equally fascinating part is to see how readers or the audience in general also have this subconscious knowledge where they can tell if the story is bad, whatever that would mean, or if the story is not written well. With the only downfall of this being that a lot of the feelings on the matter of the story, or the story not going the way they thought it was going, ends up influencing the subconscious, and then they start tying it with official terms and saying that, oh, this foreshadowing is not done well, or because the author didn't know the foreshadowing or the event was going to happen yet, which is not how foreshadowing works. So it's like it goes into things of that nature, unfortunately. But in the end, I still find it very fascinating that this seems to be true. It seems to be the case that people can subconsciously understand writing techniques. And so the purpose of this video was really just to marvel at that fact, but I want to hand it over to you and to see what you think about it. Should it be something that we acknowledge and give praise about? And what I mean by that is that if an author did make a work and then you were to criticize it and see all the writing techniques that they did use and symbolism, but then if you mentioned all these different techniques and symbolism to them, they would say that they never thought about it. Should we still give them praise? Because it's kind of difficult to say that, oh, because it's subconscious and not intentional, then you should not praise them for it. But at the same time, it was their subconscious that put it into the story. And so just because they didn't know exactly what they were doing, does it mean that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater? Should we dive into the complexities of if this person actually had studied writing, and so actually what has happened is that the techniques have been embedded into them, and so in that way it's subconscious through unconscious mastery of the topics, the writing concepts rather. And of course, should the negative be true? If the curtains went blue for that sake, and they were, for example, red or a very passionate color, and it clashed with how the character was feeling at the time, Does that mean we should chastise the author for that, even if the decision was subconscious? Should we listen to their reasoning and then they simply saying because their own curtains were orange, and should we leave it at that and say, oh, it's just something that was done for the sake of it? So it's left me with a lot of questions on how to approach that topic. But yes, I want to know your own opinions, and that'll be the video.